Arctics. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I've been seeing a lot of hype for gouache paint recently online. On various places. I've seen it on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. It's everywhere. And I don't think I've ever used gouache paint before. I know the name of it and I kind of feel like I know what it is, but I don't feel like I've used it. And I don't know why. So to get rid of my curiosity when it comes to gouache paint, I bought 3 different kinds of gouache paint just to see what they're like and see what the differences are between these 3 different kinds. So I bought some liquidy tube gouache paints, and I don't know whether this is kind of the regular standard gouache paint or not, because I don't know out of these 3 that I've bought which ones are the normal ones. I've also got this one, which I think is like a hard pan of gouache paint, similar to a watercolor palette. And then I've also got this one, which is supposed to be a jelly gouache. So 3 different kinds: liquid, solid, and jelly. Let's see what they're like, see what they're all about, see what the hype is. Okay, so the first paint I thought I'd try out is the liquid in the tubes, and it's by Arteza, and I've tried out their fluid pouring paints before, and they were quite good, so I think these will be pretty decent. I like how on the back of the box as well, it shows you the kind of light fastness of them and the transparency and opaqueness of each different color. I think that's a nice little touch. Right, let's get into this. This is interesting packaging. Oh, that's cool. Okay, so there's plenty of colours to try out. The thing is, these basically just look like acrylic paints. I don't understand what the difference is between acrylic and gouache. I think I'm just gonna go for swatches, and then I might do like a little bit of mixing and stuff. I don't know. I haven't really planned that far ahead. I just kind of want to play around with them and see what they're like. Thing is, my sense of smell isn't great anymore, so I can't really tell what it smells like. On the paper, it just looks like paint. It just looks like an acrylic paint, I suppose. Let me just kind of have a... Oh, okay. It's a bit different to an acrylic paint. I feel like gouache, or this gouache anyway, it's a lot more kind of flatter and full coverage than an acrylic paint. And it also feels quite smooth. See, like if you look at that, that looks quite nice, doesn't it? Interesting. Right, I'm going to put all these colours down and give them a bit of a swatch, see what we're working with. Okay, so I've laid my dots down. It's kind of what they look like out the tube. Basically just looks like almost an acrylic paint, but a little bit runnier. I'm gonna quickly Google what the difference is between a gouache and acrylic. Gouache. Ah, okay. So gouache paints, they dry down, opaque and matte, and apparently they can't be watered down enough to look translucent like watercolors can. And then acrylics, they have a shiny glossy appearance, while gouache is soft and flat. That depends though, because some acrylics can also dry down quite flat and matte as well. Okay, but acrylic paint can be applied thickly to create textured surfaces, and gouache can't. It's just a very flat paint. Someone's asked, is gouache better than acrylic? Gouache is more delicate than acrylics, and it's prone to water damage, but that can also be an advantage when you need to rework an area. In a way, it's a little more traditional than acrylics, because you're basically limited to working on paper or illustration board. I assume you can put it on canvas. Okay, so I guess the difference is that acrylic paints, traditionally, are quite glossy in nature and obviously more textured, whereas gouache paints are obviously flatter, matter, and you can't get texture with them. But then the difference between gouache paint and watercolor paint is the fact that watercolor paint, you can make it look like water and transparent and add them kinds of layers, whereas gouache, you can't do that. I suppose that kind of makes sense. It also just completely depends on what kind of paint you buy. Right, let me just brush these out, see what they're gonna look like. I don't think gouache is like a wet brush. I feel like I get resistance from the paint when the brush is a little bit wet, which is a bit weird. I could be making that up as well, I'm not sure. I definitely feel like gouache paints are not as experimental as acrylic paints, in the sense that it is what it is and you use it how you use it. Whereas I feel like acrylic paint is a lot more flexible in the sense you can add stuff to it and kind of play around with it. It feels more robust. I don't think gouache paint is for that. It feels kind of like, you know, when they were talking about illustration and stuff or whatever, I feel like it feels like that kind of paint. Whereas acrylic, you can kind of thin it down, you can thicken it up, you can chuck some sand in it, you can do a load of stuff with it. I don't think gouache is meant for that. I don't think so anyway. I'm getting that kind of energy from it, if that makes sense. It's telling me that it's a very serious paint, it means business, and this is all it wants to do.
Who's there? Who are you dealing with?
I'm sorry, what's your name? Oh, Liz. Oh, it's Liz.
No, get away from her. She's useless and unattractive.
But what it does do is very, very nice. Okay, so I've done some swatches. Obviously they're not dry yet, but that's kind of the colour range. And they look quite nice. It looks pretty similar to an acrylic paint. Now I just want to see how these mix. I want to add a bit of paint on here and then a little bit of water and just kind of have a play around. See if you can experiment with them. Alright, I've got a very wet brush. Oh no, they work fine with a bit of water. They mix well and blend quite nicely. Actually, they work really well with water. I don't know what I was talking about. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's pretty gorgeous, that. Oof. I think water and gouache are friends. I definitely think they're friends. I really think it's a smoother paint than acrylic. Yeah, so just like a little blendy water moment. I think that's nice, isn't it? Kind of looks like a flower. I wasn't aiming for anything. But yeah, I would say it's similar to acrylic, but a little flatter, a little smoother, and way more opaque than your typical acrylic paint. There are some acrylic paints out there that are an exception, which are very matte, very flat, and very opaque. So I agree and I don't agree. But anyway, I'm going to move on to another set of gouache paint and see what that's about. Okay, so next up, I thought I would try the dried pan-like gouache paint. And this one's by Garandash? Garandash. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a Swiss-made paint, apparently. Alright, let's have a look inside. If I can open it. What the hell? Thing is, life would be easier if I grew my fingernails. I honestly don't know how you get into this. There we go. Bloody hell. That was impossible to open. Oh, this looks nice. Oh, this company does a lot of different materials. They do like pencils and stuff. So this one has a paintbrush included. That's nice. Strangely enough, it doesn't give you a white, like dry pan. Instead, it includes a white, wet tube of paint. I don't know why that is. It's a bit strange, isn't it? So it basically looks like just kind of a regular watercolor palette, I suppose. Right, let's have a play around with this. Right, so obviously with this one, the paints are completely dry. So you do have to add water to it. And I did figure out that water and gouache are friends, so it makes sense. It's very different to a watercolor paint, actually. A watercolor paint, as soon as you put the water on, I feel like you have to scrape quite a bit to get the color. The color just kind of wants to say hello straight away. Hello. It's like, I'm here. What you want? That's nice, you know. That's really nice. The thing is, if you're a watercolor painter and you want your watercolor to be very flat and matte and not kind of wishy and watery, then I would suggest you go for something like this. Because kind of flat colours and like very matte things and stuff like that really appeal to me, and I feel like the colours are more concentrated. It just gets me more excited, and this is doing exactly that. Like a couple of weeks ago I tested out those watercolour paint palettes, and if I'm honest, I think this gouache paint palette would give a good few of them a run for its money. Obviously it's not the same effect as a watercolour. I don't know though, it's kind of similar. I'm finding it very difficult to come up with differences when it comes to watercolor and gouache, and also acrylic paint and gouache paint. Like they do have differences, but I feel like it's very subtle. Maybe gouache paint is kind of the paint that sits in between watercolor and acrylic. Possibly, I don't know. I don't think this paint was very expensive either. Oh, that blue's gorgeous. Oh, I want to marry that blue. Oh, and I want to cheat on you with this green. I'm divorcing blue and marrying green. That's like a nice teal colour. It's an upgrade from you, I'm sorry. If you give me this palette and told me it was a watercolour paint palette and just a very flat matte watercolour paint palette and didn't tell me it was gouache, I'd believe you. It feels exactly like just a really nice watercolour palette. Like these haven't fully dried yet, but that's really nice. There's some nice paints. I'm obsessed with them two colours. I absolutely love them. That's pretty cool. Let me just do like a little bit of mixing. Okay, they do blend. I don't think they blend as nicely as the liquidy tube paint, but like it works alright. Obviously, if you finessed it quite a bit and worked on it, and you weren't kind of just doing a quick study, I'm sure it would look nicer than that. But that's alright, that. I quite like it. Right, let's move on to the jelly paint. Okay, let's get you opened up. Oh, I like this box. This box is well nice. If anyone's wondering, this paint's called Artix. Artix? There, that stuff. Not sponsored or anything like that. Right, so this jelly gouache paint, they come in little 30 milliliter Oh, wasn't expecting that to happen. Ah, so they come in like little, like yogurt pots. That's a bit different, isn't it? As soon as I open this, is this going to dry out, or do you keep the lid on them? Because I don't want to ruin the paint. It doesn't tell us, so I assume you just peel the lid off and then plop it back into your little palette. Will this stay jelly though? Because obviously it's not a dried pigment. I suppose I have that lid for it. Maybe that lid keeps it kind of, like this thing, keeps it nice and sealed. I don't know. So far the texture definitely is, I don't know whether I'd really call it jelly. I would call it more of, to me it looks like just a thick acrylic paint. I'll give you a little close-up once I've got all these stupid lids off. I do like the fact that you can obviously take them out and rearrange the colours any way you want them to. Okay, so that's my little palette complete. And yeah, it looks like a thick acrylic paint. I don't know whether I'd really call it jelly. Okay, let's try these out. Let's give these a bit of a swatch. They look really fun though. Straight away they remind me exactly of the previous gouache that I had, the one that came in a tube. In fact, it reminds us of exactly that. Are you sure these are jelly? I don't think it is. I think this is just the tubed gouache paint that I had before that's been put into like a little yogurt pot thing, and they've called it jelly gouache paint. It doesn't feel like jelly paint. Well, it is thicker. I suppose it's definitely thicker than the one that was in a tube, but I'm definitely not getting the jelly kind of vibe from it. I suppose as well, because these are very similar to the tubed paint, I think you would get a lot more paint in these kind of cubes than you would in them little tiny tubes. I can't remember how much I spent on any of these, so that would kind of give me a better indication of what I think's worth what. I'll have a little check once I've swatched these. Okay, they performed really nice. I would say they're very similar to the tubed paint. Even down to the colours, I think they're very similar. I'm not going to do a blending kind of demonstration because if I was to double dip into my jelly palette, I'm going to end up with bits of paint in different colours. I feel like there should be like a spoon provided where you can just kind of scoop a dollop out, but I could invest in a tiny spoon, I suppose. I'm just wondering, will that seal it? I suppose that would seal it quite tight. I'm curious as to whether that would dry out though. Anyway, let me just quickly check the prices for all three sets of these paints, just so I can figure out which one I like the most. Okay, so the jelly gouache paint was the cheapest. That cost me £16.99. The Arteza fluid liquid gouache paint, that cost me £1 more at £17.99. And then the most expensive one was the dried watercolour-esque palette, and that cost me £27.79. And obviously in that watercolour one, you get less colours, but I think obviously the dried paint one would last way longer than the other two. So I suppose that might be why it costs more money, I'm not sure. Gouache paint though, what do I think? I've just ruined that. I was actually really impressed with them. I quite like them. It's definitely a paint I would pick up and use again. The only one I'm kind of not too sure about is the jelly gouache paint, because I just don't see the point in it. I don't see the hype in it. I just don't get it. I don't, like, why do you exist for? Is it just one of these things that have been made to kind of look kind of cool or something? I don't know. But I feel like the dry gouache paint and the wet tube paint gouache, I thought they were really good, really liked them. I'd definitely use them again. But let me know what your thoughts are on these gouache paints in the comments below, especially if you use gouache paint quite a lot. I would love to know why you choose gouache over acrylic or gouache over watercolour. But if you did enjoy today's video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next week for a brand new video.